Hey, tell me about sanctified social justice.
Well, what I do in that text is to bring a particular focus on how African American Christians in general, but especially people in the holiness and the Pentecostal tradition, have engaged the work of social justice. I talk about Black Christians as public intellectuals, and I talk about the different places of formation for this advocacy work, and also, again, the intersection of race and religion is very important in this work, and really has been a theme in all of my work. But I am, especially in my new book, attentive to, I'll call them 5 moments or trajectories in African American religion and culture. I speak about resistance. Resistance seems to always be a starting point. If you're talking about social justice, you have to be aware of the factors and the context and the forces of oppression. So I speak about resistance. I speak also a moment of renewal. And renewal is just a name for, historically, you would call them religious awakenings. But the promptings that people are responding to think of themselves and think of their world and think of their God in a certain way that gets them engaged in the issues of their time, including evangelism and including things like prayer and worship, but also being energized for the social justice work. I speak in the book about resilience, and resilience is where we fund and build our own institutions, our churches, our families, our communities, our schools, and how that legacy sometimes gets overlooked in the zeal for participation in the structures of the dominant culture. Sometimes we are neglectful of our own. And for me, it's a both and, that you endeavor to participate in all levels of the society. But if you don't establish and build your own foundation, if you neglect the foundation of your own community, in the absence of resilience, you cannot, resistance is not sustainable. I also in the book speak about reckoning and resolution, and that is when we are empowered, when we have the resources, when we have taken a posture of resistance, how do we bring solutions? How do we bring reconciliation? I have a chapter on reconciliation in the traditional Christian term, which means how we get along, how we overcome the alienation and the enmity of the past. Because reconciliation means you're reconciled. You were once together, you separated. And the Bible has wonderful theological language about reconciliation. So that's one part of it. But what do you do when reconciliation doesn't work? When the other party is not amenable to reconciliation, then we transition to reckoning. And reckoning is not necessarily violent, but reckoning is, again, in the trajectory of Christian faith, how we push the envelope to get the kind of change so that people can flourish, because that's the goal, that our families, our communities, our individuals can flourish and not be hindered in our flourishing by the forces of racism and division and all the other things that would work against. So the economic injustice, so many fronts. But we can have one vision of human flourishing that will enable and motivate us to do all of these things that are required to sanctify our advocacy of social justice. Of course, social justice can be pursued in the absence of religion, and it can be seen as an entirely secular endeavor. But that's not the book I'm writing. I'm writing about how people of faith engage in social justice advocacy.